just saw. I know many of you came in later, but this entire documentary is so impactful. It's important that we have this conversation because this is what our veterans are suffering from every single day. So if we could just take a minute and just get our minds and hearts and spirits right as we have this powerful conversation about the plight of veterans and how cannabis can save and change our lives. So my name is Cherissa Jackson. I am a retired Air Force nurse. I'm known as America's combat nurse. I've survived 4 deployments, twice to Iraq, once to Afghanistan. As a combat nurse, I took care of these soldiers off the battlefield. I also was assigned to Walter Reed, where I actually took care of them when they came home, and I've lost a lot of my friends to suicide because of pharmaceuticals, opioid abuse, and substance abuse. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart, and I am so honored to have finally met Steve Ellmore several years ago and witness what this powerful documentary is doing in the community. He and I have traveled across the country, even to Hawaii, to actually showcase this documentary so we can spread the gospel of what we need to do as a community to help save our veterans with this plant. So this panel discussion is going to be about just that. Why is it that veterans are having trouble gaining access to cannabis? What can the VA do? What can the community do? And we're going to find all these answers through the lives of my fellow colleagues here that I'm honored to be a part of this panel with. So I'm going to ask each of my fellow comrades to actually give us their names, their life story dealing with cannabis, and what their hope is for veterans and access to cannabis, please. And Steve Ellmore, we'll start with you as the creator and the producer of Unprescribed.
All right, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Maybe, can you get some photos of myself? If you, no photos or it never happened, right, folks? Yeah. So that's actually part of my outreach is really just educating, and coming out to events like this is really what drives me to get this topic going. And so I'm a veteran. I had a suicide attempt on active duty, and when I found out that veterans are using cannabis to treat their PTSD, I made it my life's mission to investigate that. And this film was my path and my journey. And so to this day, even thanks to the advice of Cherissa, I founded a nonprofit called the Unprescribed. And so the film is unprescribed, meaning you can't be prescribed cannabis, you can only be recommended it. And so my new nonprofit takes on that same namesake in the goal of getting people off of pharmaceuticals. So the unprescribed are you and me who found natural healing. And so we expanded into cannabis, psilocybin, and other medical plants. And so that's what I'm doing today, and I'm happy to save lives. In this film, the best thing I've got from it has been all the feedback where people have told me, like Boone, that it's completely changed their life. And when more veterans are telling me that they're getting off of the pharmaceuticals and finding natural alternatives, then that's telling me that my job is done. And so I'll continue to do that until it gets legalized at the federal level, so that one day, like Fabian Henry showed in Canada, I want to see it prescribed by the VA to our veterans as well. So that's our goal. So help us do that. Get the word out.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Mandile. Before I start, are there any other veterans here today? You? Thank you for your service.
Cannabis saved my life.
Yes, John.
Just like John, cannabis was one of the main reasons that I'm sitting in front of you here today breathing, let alone speaking. I use cannabis to get off of a laundry list of VA medications. There's 57 different medications over 10 years. When I first started cannabis, I was using it to help with the withdrawals of coming off of fentanyl, oxycodone, Xanax, Seroquel, and a few other medications that came along with those medications for problems I wouldn't have unless I took those medications. So it was just, it was me sitting around all day waiting for my 30-day pill dispenser to beep for me to take another pill and just count and make sure I had enough. I as well survived a suicide attempt. And then, you know, feeling just like a burden on my family because like you saw in the video, you don't feel anymore. Those medications work and they're not for, you know, getting through things and growing. It's for pains that you're gonna have post-surgery or end of life. And they had me almost take my life because of just being numb to everything and just really the only emotion I was capable of was anger. You know, I wouldn't be able to sit in a room with people, let alone get looked at by someone without being like, what are you looking at? What, you think you're better than me or something like that? And it was just not at all who I was. And as a father and a husband, you know, didn't see myself as contributing anything to my family, so tried taking my life. And like they said in there too, my wife was the one that recommended cannabis to me, and I just, you know, looked down my nose at her like, I'm not taking drugs, you know, and then had the intuition to look at what I was taking and be like, oh, fentanyl, all right, industrialized heroin, the cleanest, best heroin you can get. How am I okay with doing that? So it really got me looking into things, and since then it's changed my life. It took me 5 months to get off of all those medications and, you know, have this aha moment out. A few people here know about it, where I snowblowed my driveway and was just amazed that I was able to do that and couldn't even get inside, calling my wife, just blown away. Like, I did something, like I haven't done something in 10 years. Like, how is this possible? And then getting told by the VA, you know, that if I kept taking that, I could get in trouble. And thinking like, well, I'll take trouble because now I'm a dad again, I'm a husband again, I'm able to serve now. I went from, you know, suicide attempt to wanting to fight everybody to now I serve on the select board in my town and found another way to serve again and find purpose. And, you know, I've been called many things. I got called a pothead, a drug user, and it's like, you can call me whatever you want because my kids still get to call me dad. And my wife still gets to call me her husband, so just the power of it. And it's only allowed me to meet so many other great veterans and fight for this cause. And I have a piece of legislation in Massachusetts that we're hoping to replicate in every state, which will allow veterans in Massachusetts to access cannabis like they do in Ohio, Illinois and North Dakota, where you just submit your VA paperwork, and it's a new pathway that no cost and a lot less stigma. So we're hoping we can move the needle forward. Maybe we'll do it one state at a time, but have some amazing people here that are in this to the end. And, you know, we're veterans. We don't ever give up.
Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. My name is Ellen Brown. I'm a United States Air Force veteran. My story is a little bit different. I am not a combat veteran. But when I got out of the Air Force in circa 2009, I did find that I had a hard time adapting back to civilian life. There's the military life and then there's civilian life. So for myself, I found that when I was talking to people at the VA about the different struggles and things that I had, they gave me Zoloft, they gave me Klonopin. Why? So with that in mind, I realized that these prescription pills weren't for me, like very, very quickly, and I started talking to my friends about it. And I left for the Air Force 2 weeks after graduating high school. So all of my friends were having their senior summer. I was in boot camp. So by the time I got out, all my friends were in college at this time, and I told them how stressed out I was, and I told them about my problems with the VA. Same thing, why don't you smoke a joint? And I was like, oh, you derelicts. So I did, I smoked a joint, and I felt different, I felt better, I felt like a new person. So at the time it was 2009, and we didn't have the programs that we have now. We didn't get medical in Massachusetts till 2012. We didn't get adult use till 2016. We're in 2016. A lot of things have just continued to change, but with that in mind, we didn't have the programs. So I worked 2 jobs. I moved out to Northern California. I started as a trimmer. I worked my way up to a manager. I did every single thing from cultivation, delivery, product manufacture because we were vertically integrated. Long story short, I lost my job due to bad legislation. The dotting of some I's, the crossing of some T's can and will mess up your day, your life, and your ability to do what you want, not only for your business, but for your patients. And here's what I found. The more you fuck around, the more you're gonna find out. Keep pushing us. Keep pushing the veterans. Keep pushing the advocates. See what happens. We get smarter. We adapt, and we don't stop. Steve Mandile has a bill right now. He is not a paid advocate. He does not work for a 501c3, nor do I. I work with my state representative for medical reciprocity. Why? Because it needs to get done, and not because anybody else is doing it. Look at all the different 501c3s. Look at all the different establishments that we have. This should be their responsibility, especially the medical marijuana treatment centers, to look and say, what can we do for the patient population? They are nowhere to be found. I advocated in New Hampshire to add PTSD to the list of qualifying conditions, and it worked the first time. I've advocated with Steve Mandile to get PTSD added 3 times, and every single time it goes to a different frickin' committee. This time it went to the Committee on Cannabis, and I said, I was trying to be a smart mouth. And I was like, this is our 3rd time. Is the 3rd time the charm? And you know what they said to me? Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We didn't realize it was the 3rd time. I was being a smart mouth. Are you kidding me? The legislators are not paying attention. People are not paying attention. 22 a day applies to those that have committed suicide, and there's a literal way that you can go, yes, that there was a correlation between them and a direct suicide. But what about the veterans that accidentally overdose? What about those friends of mine that don't get to count toward that 22 a day statistic? I'm pissed. And with that in mind, I am not going to let it go. I'm going to get smarter. I'm going to become a better advocate. I'm going to start every single one of my emails with thank you for your time, but what are we going to do about it? Don't come to these kinds of things without a fire within you. That's why you're here in this room today. You are here because you care. You care. Look, hey, where are any commissioners in the room? Any state legislators? Oh, no. Exactly. That is it. We got over frickin' close to 30, 50 people in this room. Not one of them could be bothered to come. They don't know what's going on with veterans. They don't take the time, so we're going to take the time. And when you mentioned psilocybin, there are bills by the Bay Staters for Natural Medicine advocating for not only cannabis but psilocybin as far as natural medicines. Be careful of interlopers. Be careful of regulators. They are not your friends. I'm going to pass along, but as you can see, there is a need for education and reform, not just conversation. So thank you for everything that you do, and thank you to the people that are in this room. Thank you for doing more than the legislators or any regulatory body.
Thank you. Air Force veterans rock. We rock.
Well, I'm never going to follow you. Hello, everyone. My name is Wayne Smith, and I am a Vietnam veteran. I served as a combat medic in Vietnam. I spent 18 months there. But before I talk about that, I want to thank the organizers of this Cannabis Science Foundation. God, I wish you were around in 1968. We needed you so badly.
I wasn't born yet.
Many of you were not. That was chilling, but also exciting. I grew up in Providence. Welcome to this lovely city. And I also had the good fortune to grow up during the summer of love and had experimented with hashish and cannabis in my teens. And in fact, the night before I was inducted into the U.S. Army, some friends of mine gave me a going away party, and Cream, some of you may know the band Cream played their very last concert here in Providence, at the Providence Auditorium. And it was amazing, but it was an amazing concert, but the next day when I showed up for induction, the medical doctors, they were testing me, and they accused me of taking something to try to get out of being inducted, which was ironic because I volunteered. I wanted to serve. I wanted to be inducted. But I had consumed cannabis very early, and arriving in Vietnam, going into a war zone is, as you've heard so well and articulately from some of the people in the film, it's time immemorial. War is hell, and it is beyond what any human being should be exposed to, but that happens. And finding a way out of hell is really what we're talking about, especially for veterans, especially for combat veterans. But in Vietnam, we were fortunate to have some of the very best cannabis in the world. And it was very cheap and it was widespread. Again, that generation of hippies, if you will, who went into Vietnam, went also with the attitudes, not drinkers, but cannabis in many ways was self-medicating for us. Certainly for me, I got to take forward. I was nicknamed Captain Trip, even though I was just a private. So that gives you a sense of some of that experience. But beyond war, as I said, and as you heard, coming home, trying to make sense of one's life from being crashed on the rocks of your hopes and dreams and aspirations of what a democracy is, what is fairness. As you heard so well from Ellen, we veterans learned some really, I think, critical lessons. One is preparation and adaptation. You have to learn how to adapt to some of the most awkward and uncompromising situations. And I say that because that really there's been a constant in my life since the 1960s, and it has been cannabis. And, you know, it wasn't that I started off thinking, oh, this is gonna help me, but it did. Coming back from war, I had some horrendous experiences. I spent some time in jail here in Rhode Island. It's fairly well documented, but more importantly, my story is one of redemption. And cannabis, again, played a part of it. Way before PTSD was even a diagnosis, I'd gotten a degree in psychology, mostly to figure my own ass out. But that degree allowed me to help work with other Vietnam veterans and their families. And it was about this thing, this vibe, and you feel it within this cannabis industry, within this cannabis community, that there is not just about profits or about spreading good products or producing good technology or doing good research. We genuinely believe and know that cannabis has medicinal value. Beyond medicinal, it has good spiritual value. And so the challenge for many of us veterans after Vietnam was reinventing the VA. And we did. We had to transform the VA. There was no vet centers, there was nothing. And it was just us. But in surviving that war, we vowed and founded an organization on the principle, never again would one generation of veterans abandon another. And we kept that vow. Today I'm on the board of directors of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. It is the largest post 9/11 veterans organization. I'm also on the board of directors of the National Veteran Legal Service Program, the nation's largest veterans law firm, that through lawsuits suing the VA just to comport with congressional intent, we have put more than $5 billion into the hands of veterans and their families that should have gotten it. But through government intransigence and incompetence, vigilance is required to provide the kinds of services that veterans and their families need. And I say this again, all because I look at the cannabis industry, and I do think it's a cannabis industry, but it's also a movement. Because I think that we have the potential to change the way the VA provides services to veterans. There will come a time when the VA has a list of cannabis-related products that veterans and their families can use. It is so clear to me, because again, I remember a time when guys would just get locked up for a joint, do serious time. So we've moved past that, and it's because of you and some of the generation that preceded you, and also the generation that will follow you. So I want to give you a sense of hope that Stephen had mentioned, Ellen and Steve, that there is a wide body, not only of veterans, but people that share your values, that believe in this product, and believe that the United States, that through pressure on Congress, pressure on state governments, pressure on local municipalities, can affect the kind of change that cannabis will be a common prescribed medication. That cannabis products will not be looked at as taboo, and it will provide us, those of us that need it, to help us get through some of the pain. Or I have 2 types of cancer related to the Agent Orange I was exposed to in Vietnam. There's not a goddamn way I would step a foot in the VA hospital. None, fortunately for me. So I say that it isn't just about me, but those kinds of options must be created for other veterans. And that's what I'm committed to with the work for the rest of my life. Stephen is, and so many of us. So I want to again thank you for all that you've done. You have no idea how an old guy like me can feel so young, seeing the dynamics of what is happening, seeing the hope and optimism that we can in fact change this goddamn country and world. And I thank you for all of what you're doing, and we will continue to do it. We look forward to your questions.
As you can see, we have some very passionate veteran advocates here on the panel today, and I appreciate you all for your support, what you guys are doing out there, the work. I mean, I see it, so I'm sure other veterans see it as well. So we're going to get into only 2 questions, and then we'll take questions from the audience just to be able to save time. We are keeping you guys from lunch, so I'm sure you guys want to eat. So the first question, I want to start with Stephen. When you first started to use cannabis, what were some of your challenges at first, and have those challenges changed? Have things gotten better? Can you take that question for me?
Sure, thank you for asking, great question. Yeah, cannabis, the change was very difficult. It was, I think, a year before the first medical dispensary opened in Massachusetts. So I got to shop on Craigslist and meet a total stranger in a mall parking lot for some concentrate that I'd never tried, never heard of, and I'm just like, all right, well, this is off to a rough start. I meet some stranger in a parking lot. Who knows how this is gonna go? It was a lot easier just to go online, put in my request for a refill, and have it come in the mail. That was so easy, and for me, it cost me $0. Now I'm coming out of pocket. So for a lot of time, it was, literally sitting down with my wife at our kitchen table and be like, all right, we have these bills due, overdue. I need medicine. What are we gonna do? All right, well, we'll push paying the electric bill out a little further. We'll push paying this bill out a little further, just so I could stop taking those other medications that tried to kill me. And that kind of, everything I do with cannabis is always been about like, oh great, it helps me, but shoot, what about everybody else? How do I get this access to the rest of my brothers and sisters and everyone out there? So, once the dispensary opened, I started approaching dispensaries and saying, veterans are facing, I went in there with the data, which matters, and told them all about the access issues we have and what medications we get for nothing, and got a good number of dispensaries in Massachusetts to offer veterans with 100% disability rating a 40% discount on the cannabis, which for me is life-changing. It's from spending anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 a month on cannabis to $300 to $500 to $600 in savings. So it's terrible that we go from, all right, I have this medication that I'm receiving as an earned benefit. Not only does it not cost me anything, I'm getting it because I earned it, but it also comes with everything else that it comes with and all the side effects and the dangers. And I just have these like nightmares of when I was letting my 3-year-old daughter put my fentanyl patch on my chest and thinking like, I had no idea. I had no idea what it was using, and no one was telling me anything. They were telling me it's what I need. So it was access, finding the right places to go to, finding the right medications, and just being like, and I would tell them my story, they'd offer me the discount, and I'd just say, I appreciate that, but I want this for everybody. I don't want this for me. And I think we can head in that direction as the industry matures in our state and soon in Rhode Island. It'll come around, but we have to be out there making it known. Nobody knows what they don't know, and with only such a tiny percentage of the population being veterans, there's not many people that know.
Thank you for that. The next question is for Ellen. You and I are two proud women veterans, and most of you in the audience don't know that there's an increase of military sexual trauma in the military right now. And we as women veterans are facing an increase of PTSD, anxiety, depression because of the military sexual trauma. So Ellen, my question to you is, what is your hope for women veterans suffering from military sexual trauma, and how cannabis can help them with their condition?
That's a great question, and it's an important topic to bring attention to and to let people know that if they've ever experienced sexual trauma, that there are resources that are non-judgmental. They're here to help you. They're there to, whether it is counseling or different resources that are needed, the VA does have those resources. Now, do they answer the phone? That's the thing. I was also, I'm very fortunate to be able to have been a panelist at the Portland Science Symposium with Patrick Saint and a lot of other wonderful veterans. So us veterans, we talked together coast to coast, and the same question came up, and when you call the Portland, Oregon VA, it just goes automatically to the message machine. And that's the kind of problems that we're dealing with. It just goes to the message machine. Who checks it? When do they ever get back to you? I left messages. I started off nice, and then they got a little more scary. But nobody ever got back to me, and that's part of the problem. So if I get a little bit more indignant as time gone on, hi, I called a week ago. Hi, I called a day ago. Hi, I called a month ago. Is there a follow-up? So making sure that our veterans are heard, and sexual trauma happens to both men and women and every gender identity. So letting people know that there are resources available in the VA if you have experienced this, and in our state of Massachusetts. Being in the cannabis industry, what's interesting is that a lot of different states, depending like Vermont, something that I teach as it relates to cannabis is how to report for sexual assault and sexual harassment in the workplace, what to do as far as human trafficking and relating to the cannabis industry. Oh yeah, all these different things that we don't necessarily think about where people might need resources and guidance. So letting other veterans know that I'm here as a resource and a guidance. And if they're not going to pick up the phone for you, let me know and I'll help call too. And if we keep calling and we keep talking to people, eventually we are going to be able to get an answer and the resources that we need. So don't give up, and remember that there are agencies available, and reach out to your local veterans. Sometimes your best support system might be veterans, your family, your friends, your doctor, your primary care. Thank you, Dr. Sulak, for being here. So with that in mind, and our other veterans, so just know that you're not alone. And it can feel very lonely, and it can feel very isolating. But sometimes when you're smoking a joint, you realize, you know what? It's going to be okay. So when you smoke that joint, you're like, maybe, what resources did I have? What did Ellen say? So think about this conversation and think about how you can be that resource, because I promise you, you might know more than other people that you would consider would be the authoritative figures and resources. So please be that.
Steve Ellmore, I know I've heard you say so many times that instead of we focusing on the 22, which is now 44, that take their lives each day while we're sitting here in this conference, veterans go and contemplate taking his or her life, and you said, I want to save the 22. How do you feel about that number being higher since you created the movie and is now, quote unquote, upward of 44 a day? Are you still on that journey? Are you still on that path, wanting to now save the 44? And if so, what are you looking to do in the future?
Well, I've always been a proponent of suicide prevention, especially in the veterans arena. And as far as the numbers go, a couple of years ago, the number had dropped down to like 17. And the number, I'm thankful that they're actually reporting the numbers more accurately. I think what they're doing is actually digging deeper and just uncovering it. And my answer to that is very simple. One is too many. One is too many. It doesn't matter if it's 17, 22, 44, 100. If we're killing ourselves, and I really appreciate what you said about, we don't even count the people that are dying of the opioid overdoses on the drugs that they're given to us in the first place. And so my message is to really educate people that cannabis is truly medicine. And for all the naysayers who are worried about people showing up in the workplaces, it's just like any other drug. If you're gonna give me an opioid and expect me to do my job, how are you gonna criticize me if I'm gonna smoke cannabis, which is actually gonna wind up giving me clarity and focus and attention to what I'm doing? It's just baffling. It's absolutely ironic. And as far as the suicides go, full disclosure here, I work for the Veterans Administration. I work in the National Suicide Administration, the National Cemetery Administration. And my personal mission is to prevent veterans from using that last great benefit of their burial benefits. And so I do want to hail the VA on, they don't have the answer, but they're trying. And one of the first things they've done recently is a step in the right direction is they've changed the National Suicide Prevention Hotline to 988, an easy number to remember. And then veterans themselves can even press 1 and get put in touch with a specific veteran-oriented person who can relate to what they're going through. So you're not just getting some random tech that's on a phone line, you're getting real help. And so my goal is here to encourage people to understand those resources and direct anybody that they know that is suffering through trauma to actually seek out help. And the Veterans Network is the best way to go. And so we need each other and we need to stick together, and together we can reduce those numbers. But we can't do it alone. We have to all be one giant voice.
Absolutely. So we'll take questions from the audience right now, if there's any. Ooh, okay. I'll take the mic. Sorry. I don't know who went up first.
First, I just want to thank you all for your stories. So I am a provider in Vermont State, and part of my stumbling block is how would you suggest trying to bridge the gap between veterans with PTSD and civilians with PTSD? I see a huge amount of adolescence right now, and whether it's one event that caused it or complex developmental trauma, how do you were saying join legislation, and that I need some help on where to start here, because if I told one of the parents, I really think your kid just needs to go home and smoke some weed. Teachers are referring their kids to me because there are kids who are getting high before going to school because they have so much anxiety, and you're not gonna prescribe benzos, although some people do, and they are on the SSRIs. And unfortunately, a lot of them are also going back home to trauma, but how do I start?
I know, I actually know. So I work in the state of Vermont, thank you so much, and the Vermont Cannabis Control Board is one of the most engaging governing bodies. They're very polite, they're very responsive, there's only 3 of them. Right, it's less people to talk to. Email them, say, hi, I am a practitioner here in the state. I know that our veterans have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. I know that there are only 2 vertically integrated medical dispensaries in the state. The more information, the better. I know this because I teach the compliance. So with that in mind, you and I got a lot to talk about. Once you know the regulations, and you also know that the state of Vermont is something very unique that the state of Massachusetts and a lot of states don't, as a part of their social equity and economic empowerment program, they actually name veterans. New York City, they name veterans as well with the stipulations that but disabled veteran. In Vermont, it's just veteran. In Massachusetts, it's not at all. So with that in mind, you can say, hey, there's a need, we have demographics, we have training, how can we talk to this? And not only that, but our youth prevention. So I am finding myself in a position where I am uniquely qualified to talk about these subjects because I am the person that is the bridge in the gap between what's going on and the legislators. So please allow me to be a resource. And not only that, work with people that come in. So the New England Cannabis Convention, reach out to Mark Shepard and say, hey Mark, how do I do a panel? Reach out to the Cannabis Advisory Board, say, hey, how can I do an event or a fundraiser or something like that? They'll talk to you, they'll figure out how to give you space. They have the funding to do this. So say, hey, how do we work together? Here are my credentials, what are yours? Remember, you're more qualified.
Love it. Another question?
Does the VA help patients get off medications?
No.
Do they, no? Like if you guys go in and say, I don't want this anymore, will they decrease doses and work with you?
I can answer that to a certain extent. I'll tell you what they're doing, and this is both. So this is me speaking as both a veteran and a VA personnel.
Yeah.
Okay. They're working on it, and in fact, right now, the VA is taking a holistic approach, and this is where, like my organization, Plans Over Pills is our motto, and they're taking steps that they haven't done in the past. For example, they are taking a holistic approach and looking at natural alternatives. They're even looking at acupuncture and different things like that. Several years ago, they wouldn't even look at chiropractors, okay? And now they're doing that. And so the idea is to keep educating them and keep talking about them, reassure them that they've taken the right approach with the holistic thing, but they're missing one key link in the chain, and that's plant medicine. Now, fortunately, they're taking it a step beyond cannabis, and now they're actually looking at MDMA and psilocybin. So I commend them that they're actually opening their eyes and they're not being blinded by old passive laws. Even Dr. Sisson, who's in the film, is taking a step from the cannabis and now looking at that psilocybin and other psychedelics. And so if we just keep voicing those concerns and pushing that support on what they're doing, we're taking the right steps. Are they getting
challenge you
people
have
off?
with that is you go into your first group meeting, and the first thing they have you sign is that you can't take any Schedule I drug at all, or you would not be able to be in the group. If you talk to your doctors, and especially if you're trying to go for your 100% disability, that can go into your record and be weighed against in Washington, D.C. if you're gonna get your benefits or not. So you can't have that open conversation because you're signing a piece of paper. You started groups. I'm at the Huntington VA. I thought I had the best doctors because it was Lisa Fisher, the National Director of PTSD. And the first thing you do in a group is sign. If you sign that paper and they discover that you're in any Schedule I, you can't have the open conversation. Then as with medications, as you're saying, how do you wean off medications?
Because there's compounds
You know, I had to
pharmacies,
personally,
and you can do it.
I don't advise anyone, if you're taking, my cocktail was lorazepam, Zyprexa, citalopram, Klonopin, high doses, and you can't just stop. And so what you need to do, if you want to self-do it without identifying yourself with your physician, you literally need, I had to crush my pills, or had my wife do it for me, and crush those pills, and every 3 to 5 days, a little less, 3 or 4 or 5 months down the road, there's nothing left to give. And then you give it to cannabis, because if you crash off those medicines, you'll fry your dopamine receptors, and you'll be walking halls at a mental hospital for about 3 months. And so you make the pivot. What was funny is I get my semi-annual "How's your pills doing" for you, and I couldn't tell my doctors at the time. They finally, 15 years of treatment. Similar story. I wasn't the dad I could have been, the husband I should have been. I was my monster in the closet, my kid's monster in the closet. You know, so it's secondary. It does, as you're talking about, it does transfer. Your disease transfers to your kids if you don't get the right out. And my kid left in 2007 for college. He didn't want to ever speak to me again. You know, so. But you have to really take care of it. If it's anything that I want your board to do is reach out to the government and really advocate Schedule III. Because then that opens up the door for higher educational research, grants, a perfect lane for you to be in, because you'll be able to, you got 2 miles, you're 2 miles ahead of the game. And you know, so just don't be very careful of coming off. And because it could any advice that you give, it could be, that coming off is more dangerous than getting on.
It's easy to get on,
Yeah.
and they don't help you get on.
One thing I do want to point out, just to piggyback off of that, now, I've also found in my dealings with veterans across the country, it's people are still running things, and some people are still ingrained in them that it's bad. But, so where you're getting negative things like that in some places is better in other places. But understand that at the national level, there has been legislation that has been passed that has addressed the number one concern, and that's the fear of even speaking about it with your doctors, especially your VA doctors, because of fear of losing the benefits. And so that's one thing that people like Stephen and other veterans that I've worked with have fought to get, was we can now talk to our doctors about it. And that for me is critical, that just like your pharmacist, you need to talk about drug interaction. And even being able to talk about it now with my doctor, we've lowered the doses of the drugs that I do have to take. I still have to take an antidepressant, an anti-anxiety pill, but it's 5 milligrams because I'm supplementing it with the cannabis. And now I don't have to have that fear about even worrying about jeopardizing that if I'm medicating on my own on the side. But I don't want to be taking higher doses of opioids and other things if I'm already using this. And so that's where the key is about keeping that open communication going with your doctor and your providers and everyone else involved. So.
My quick comment is that there's an old saying that no therapy is better than bad therapy. And the VA is a broken system. You really must understand that it is probably the largest healthcare system in the world. We spend, next year's VA healthcare budget is $350 billion. They have 400,000 employees, and they're servicing 9 million veterans. And many of them, the VA system is really broken. And again, that's the challenge I want to put to you, is to look to alternatives to the VA. I would not recommend a veteran to go to the VA for detoxification, for example. I mean, again, small example, but I went to the VA for cancer treatment, and they used an outdated or last year's isotope to detect my cancer. Yeah. When I went to Dana-Farber 2 weeks later, they told me not only was it a dated isotope, they did the correct one, and they found a cancer the VA had completely missed. Mm-hmm. So our healthcare is too important to leave in the hands of the VA, in my opinion.
I totally agree, and for the sake of time, I do know you guys, we have a schedule and we want to make sure we adhere to that schedule. You can certainly stick behind and talk with our panelists if you like, but please give these panelists a round of applause for their stories, their duties. Thank you everybody in the hallways, and thank you all for staying and watching this very wonderful movie on Unprescribed.
Yes.
Saved my life.
Sorry we didn't get your question. I'm anxious to hear it.
What's your name?
Ellen Brown.